I would like to just introduce the panel.
All right, thanks so much. This is Justin Hendrix, Executive Director of RLab. Thank you so much for that introduction, and so excited for this panel today, and glad that we're here together, as it were. We've got a great session. I'm going to lead you through the first sort of 10 minutes of this, and then I'm going to essentially kind of hand it over to my colleague Adaora, who is going to moderate this discussion with Ori, with Christian, with Francis. And we'll get into the meat of that discussion, which I think will be a great one. And very excited about all the different startup activities that are taking place today across this track. And just by way of background, I've been working at the intersection of emerging media technology, university, research, corporate innovation, entrepreneurship for about the last 10 years, after I spent about a dozen years in media, a large part of that at The Economist. About eight years ago, I was the second employee at a thing called New York City Media Lab, which then was a sort of early idea, and today is a consortium that has 7 universities and 20 plus media and technology companies in it in New York City doing various work around emerging media technology. In running the Media Lab, I got to know researchers like Ken Perlin at NYU, Stephen Feiner at Columbia, Maya Georgieva at the New School. And really, I got to know a little more about a space that they had all been studying for years, which, at the time was just beginning to go through an immense amount of growth, this world of XR. And I saw that represented a huge opportunity for New York. And I wasn't the only one thinking that. There were a lot of folks around the city sort of looking at the XR space, about VR and AR, thinking about what it meant. And the premise then, as I really think it is now, was that this next wave of human-computer interaction creates massive opportunities for value creation and demands for new skills and ideas. And so we know that at each juncture of how we interact with machines, we've seen whole industries transformed. We've seen really rise and fall of some greats. And it's not a perfect, but one of the ways to depict this is this old graphic from DigiCapital that I'm sure many of you have seen. One of the better attempts at turning this idea into a visual that shows you that progression. If we think about this sort of 40 or 50-year history from the PC on into these future interface technologies that we're so excited about, it's certainly created a lot of opportunity along the way. Now, I mentioned sort of folks at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, which looks after economic development in New York, and a thing called the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, which goes to show just how important media is as an industry in New York, that there's a whole mayoral office devoted to it. They were looking at this as well, and they thought, if you think about this transition, if you think about all the value that's created, and you think of the impact the smartphone had just in the last decade on media, on advertising, on transportation, on banking, food, entertainment, the question really was, if a similar transition occurs around future interfaces, how do we take advantage of that? How can we best harness it to create opportunities for New York and for New Yorkers? And so they put their heads together and issued an RFP to develop a new lab. And based on our experience with New York City Media Lab, we applied as a consortium that included NYU and a variety of different partners from across New York City. So NYU's Tandon School of Engineering, but then crucially also other academic partners, Columbia, CUNY, and the New School, and crucially 3 specific programs in CUNY that came in to really help us address how to transform these ideas and these technologies into career opportunities, into workforce training, and into various ways to think about applying future interfaces in journalism and in healthcare and beyond. And we knew that as a big part of this, and why we're part of the startup track here today, we wanted to focus on creating startups. And so that's been a major focus of our lab and what we've tried to do, not just commercializing startups out of the universities, but also attracting startups to New York City from elsewhere. And so we created a partnership with Ori and with SuperVentures, and that's been incredibly fruitful. We've already run 2 cohorts of an accelerator program with Ori. My colleague Adaora has led those cohorts, as well as a number of programs to encourage entrepreneurship at various stages, both from the university and including later stage companies coming to New York to figure out how to expand their businesses here. And to do all this, we chose to set up shop in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which, if you don't know it, is a mission-driven industrial park that is an old shipyard. It's where America built its war machine in World War II. We're in an old Navy telecom lab that's World War II telecoms that was converted into a sugar factory before we took it over in 2018. We were operating there essentially in raw space for a time in Building 22, but we're just about to complete construction on a full 16,000 square feet of classrooms, studios, and workspace. And the jewel of the space is actually the RLab studio. My virtual background is actually a rendering of it that our director of technology created. But I'll invite you to come and visit us soon. This is a sort of picture of the space in operation. Very cool, Brooklyn space that we think is going to be a real fantastic meeting place and certainly laboratory for XR. So I look forward to welcoming you there soon. But a key piece of what we're doing in the space is helping to launch startups. And many of you have seen some of them that have had a presence at AWE over the last couple of years. Just for instance, I would include their Echo AR, which some of you will know is a cloud platform focused on augmented reality applications. Paralux, really interesting company that formed out of Ken Perlin's lab at NYU, dealing with some of the data compression issues and other things to do with delivering multi-user XR experiences. OpenBCI, which you'll hear from in just a little while, a company that emerged in part out of the New School that is focused on delivering, low-cost brain-computer interface software and hardware on an open source basis that creates opportunities for all sorts of folks, from scientists to folks that are building their own products. And then, of course, LexSet, which you'll hear from in just a little while. Francis from LexSet will tell you how his vision for synthetic data has moved from mixed reality on through to robotics, and give you a good sense of what he's doing there. Really exciting new business model. And Francis, I'll just point out, also a product of New York University with a master's from the Pratt Institute. So these are the types of companies we're trying to cultivate in New York, not just companies applying XR to various fields, but ones that are developing enabling technologies that take us forward into the next frontier of human-computer interaction. And as I said, you can hear from all these companies in the current accelerator cohort at 2:10 today as part of the startup pitch session there. And so we're also working with large companies. We want to kind of introduce those to these startups. We want to not just teach them how to apply these technologies, but also to think about how they can connect with startups in our ecosystem, how they can connect with university research, with others in the ecosystem, activate the New York ecosystem, and create those types of opportunities. My colleague Adaora, who is going to lead the panel, leads those efforts. I'm sure she'd like to talk to anybody out there about opportunities to get engaged.
Yes, I would.
And the discussion will include Christian Guirnalda from Verizon, who's been one of our key partners in the Media Lab and is one of America's experts on open innovation. So I think you'll have a lot to say about that. And crucially, a big part of what we do at RLab is also to educate people. So in keeping with our mission as a university, what we're trying to do is ensure a qualified workforce. So we've got a variety of programs that combine professional, technical education, executive education, online education to do that. And so led by my colleague, Alexis Seeley, those programs cover a wide range of topics in XR and spatial computing, some delivered online, some in person. And I have to plug at least just one upcoming course. If any of you are interested in it, I'd be happy to, if you tweet at me, try to find you a discount perhaps. But we've got one coming up on 3D capture, scanning techniques, workflows, applications. Really anybody that's interested in doing a deep dive on 3D scanning, optimizing assets of various platforms with AR, VR, WebGL, 3D printing, all that stuff. There's 10 hours of content assignments to complete in a week. Good stuff to do while we're working from home. So a big part of what we do, of course, is community and trying to introduce New Yorkers to opportunity. And we host tons of meetups, whether it's the New York VR meetup, Ori's AWE New York meetup. We've done IGEA jams and hackathons with Unity, Samsung, Magic Leap, really across the board. And I'll just mention, some of this is about creating very specific opportunities. One of my favorite programs that we do is to run a fellowship with Weill Cornell, with the Macaulay Honors College at CUNY, which has introduced students to opportunities like creating augmented reality demonstrations of how various pharmaceuticals interact with cancers. And so Alex Segaris, who's there pictured to the right, is one of the researchers there who's worked with these CUNY students to do this type of work. So what we're trying to do is really, as the panel name would suggest, is build an ecosystem. And that includes, really hosting a neutral place for folks to gather, a place where we can match market insights with technical insights and technology ideas, a place where we can match talent to opportunities, and where we can nurture other community organizers. We're not the only community organizers in New York working on XR. There's a ton of them. Christian's one of them. And there are many others that are in this space. Ori is certainly a global organizer and also a very important organizer in the New York ecosystem. But what we're trying to do is really cultivate those intersections across multiple areas, whether it's in health, whether it's in industry, whether it's in media, whether it's in thoughts around the intersection of technology and society. That's what we're up to. And I couldn't do this presentation without mentioning, obviously, the giant gorilla in the room right now in the current moment, which is coronavirus and the pandemic. And I just saw this headline yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, so I thought I'd throw it up there. New York starts mapping out the road back from coronavirus, and it's long. Anybody watching this around the world knows that New York has been hit hard. My city's been hit hard. People are hurting here. But I will also say, as a technologist, as someone in an engineering school, as someone who's surrounded by people who want to solve problems, it also is a moment of opportunity. And every day we're waking up to headlines that suggest what those opportunities might be. Whether it's thinking about how to reimagine education, thinking about how to reimagine work, thinking about how entertainment and media and live events might change. Indeed, how to think about healthcare. All of those things are certainly presenting major opportunities for us in the XR space. So we think of RLab as a real place to solve that problem. I've been using some of the time of the lockdown to talk to other experts. Ori's one of them I've had a chance to talk with lately, some of Christian's colleagues in the 5G lab, as well as others. And I just thought I'd mention a couple of things here. Tipitat Chinivasan, who some of you will know, co-founder of the Venture Reality Fund, he really said this is an incredible moment to think about the digitization of labor and work and what that's going to mean for the way we move ahead in the workforce and how we could potentially use this moment to bring even more people into the digital economy as we look to ways to create opportunities for people to participate remotely. Jaron Lanier, many of you know as a VR pioneer, who reminded me that the original promise of these technologies, really wasn't to put people into environments to interact with media, but to interact with one another. And that's one of the key things that we're working on right now. The artist Stephanie Dinkins, who reminded me that it's really important that right now we think about how we can use these technologies to enable our humanity as opposed to enable systems that want to just sort of perpetrate us into particular modes of behavior. That seems very, very important as more and more of our life is moving online right now. And finally, Genevieve Bell, the Intel researcher who's now an academic also in Australia, who reminded me of the real friction that you create when you try to do things across disciplines and you try to bring diverse mindsets into this work, but how important that is and how important it is to look for opportunities to bridge all those different vocabularies across technical disciplines, social sciences, problems in the real world. So I'll stop there. I think what we're trying to do in RLab really, it's focused on XR, it's focused on augmented and virtual reality and those things. But the reality is what we want to do is change the real world. We're trying to really create opportunities for real people and solve problems. And I know that that's what this panel is about as well, and what most of the startups that we work with are trying to do. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Adaora. Our names are relatively easy to remember. We're easy to get in touch with. Justin at rlab.nyc, Adaora at rlab.nyc. And I look forward to this discussion. So Adaora, over to you.
Thanks very much, Justin. And of course, Ori, thanks to you for inviting us, and thanks to you for being a partner, a key partner in us building this ecosystem. Let's drill down. We could obviously talk about many of these issues for days. We have about 20 minutes. So I want to say to those of you who are watching this panel, feel free to drop in questions because we'd love to integrate that into some of our conversation. And when we talk about ecosystems, at the end of the day, you're usually talking about some level of cross-discipline, a level of cross-discipline participation. So Ori is representing the investors that we engage as we are building this ecosystem. We have dozens and dozens in our world right now. And of course, Francis representing a startup, an extraordinary startup that's been doing some amazing things. And then Christian is, of course, representing a corporate view of why ecosystem building is so important. Christian, Verizon is a very big company. Why would you choose to engage so very specifically in New York with RLab and the media and other organizations?
Yeah, look, I think, big companies won't survive unless they go and work with the folks that live, work, and are a part of the communities that we're in, right? Our employees are living in towns and cities. Our customers are there. Our products and services are those that are trying to help move the world forward in times like these. And so if we're not proactive about being good participants and contributors into our community from the get-go, we're setting ourselves or any big company up for failure. So almost 10 years ago when I started at Verizon, it was about investing through Verizon Ventures to make sure that the young companies as well who are going to build the next unicorn or solve the great problem coming out of coronavirus get support from a company like ours along the way. And then move that into an open innovation function where it's not just the startup ecosystem, but it's academics, it's students, it's R&D. It's about how we even hire in some of those folks along the way to create great outcomes for the communities that we live in and for our employees and for the company. So we think about society as a big component of where Verizon's sort of goals of moving things forward lie. And we started that a long time ago. And it's about venture investing, but it's also about sort of nurturement, engagement, and education, because we are making investments into the infrastructure that's going to help power these things going forward. And if you're a startup or if you're a nonprofit, if you're a big company and you're not thinking about what a 5G world is going to look like from a capability perspective, well, you're not future-proofing what your roadmap or your potential can be and how you can solve the problems that you're trying to shoot for.
Yeah, so it is that trying to be in the now and the future of now, and that will take us to Francis, because you're creating those tools right now for full application and material value in the future. So talk to us about LexSet. Why did you choose to come to our lab and participate in our accelerator? And what does ecosystem building mean for you relative to the fact that you actually were working and living in New York City?
Sure. So LexSet, the story of LexSet is we started actually trying to solve a very different problem than we're solving now. When we started the company, we were building an artificial intelligence to help people make design decisions. We were focused very much on retail applications. And along that path, we discovered that we could solve an even bigger problem. We were building a lot of artificial intelligence. We noticed the way we get captured and acquired data was fundamentally wrong. It was slow, it was tedious, it was very expensive for a startup. And we had developed our own technology internally to help us improve artificial intelligence. And about last year, around the time we started our lab, we had decided to pivot the company to focus exclusively on selling this solution. We spent a year building ourselves into one ecosystem. We needed to very rapidly get into a new ecosystem. And we had known Ori and we had known of our lab for our involvement in AWE. And we were very aware of the network that surrounded it and the community. We made a strategic decision that this would be the right place for us to rapidly get into that new community, into that new network, and take our business in the direction we needed to go.
We're going to get back to how successful that's been for you in a second, but I want to note that in the year and a half that we've been in business, because RLab is a very new enterprise, we've had more than 300 applications from startups over 6 continents and 25 countries. And we've admitted about 45 of those companies into our variety of programs, which brings us to Ori. What is the value for you in being plugged into this world where we have corporates, we have startups, we have academics, we have researchers, both in New York City, in the United States, but also globally?
Hey everyone. So, I mean, first I want to acknowledge the incredible work that Justin, Adaora, and the RLab team is doing, along with New York City, kind of investing in driving innovation in AR and VR and XR as a whole, and really believing in the need to kind of push this forward. I mean, New York right now, I think, is only second best to Silicon Valley in terms of the amount of investments. But I would say that it has actually quite a bit of advantages over Silicon Valley in terms of bringing these technologies to people, because it's more about, the applications of technology, not the technology itself, which sometimes Silicon Valley can be too much focused on. But from my perspective, when I started my first AR company in 2008. There was no ecosystem, there were no investors focusing on this area. There were no labs like the RLab, and it was super tough. And at that point, actually, I realized that we have to start AWE, to really help bring the ecosystem together. And, just 8 years later, New York City realized it's important, and entrepreneurs like you guys at the RLab, and as well as some corporations like Verizon and others, realize it's important to actually start connecting startups, corporations, investors, and bringing together into this program. So, as an investor, having such a program is a gift, because you get the company into a very intense 3-month program. You kind of look at all the aspects of the company, from the pitch through business models, financial aspects, and really make sure that they're getting on track towards their next big leap in the company. So I think from an investor perspective, it gives you more confidence in your investment, a much more intimate connection with the company, and really help them succeed in the future. So I think it's a kind of a no-brainer for any investor to be connected to such amazing labs like RLab.
What I'd like to do now, because we don't have that much time left, I want to leapfrog to where we are in the midst of this coronavirus. And I'd really love for Francis and Christian to talk about their relationship and what the two of you have been doing together, and what you see as a result of this virus in terms of the applications of these technologies. I'm going to start with you, Francis, because you said yesterday that you thought it was a big, huge accelerator for engagement around these new digital tools and platforms.
Yeah, I think, look, this is clearly a phase change, right? This is a very serious thing that's just happened to the world. We have seen companies, prospective clients, customers, they're taking these new technologies very, very seriously now. Things that were once nice to haves are now need to haves. I think the social interaction is not going to be the same for a very long time, maybe never. I think we're seeing people accelerating things like artificial intelligence research, augmented reality, the use of VR, collaborative tools. I mean, even us as a startup, right? We've started using VR as a collaborative tool to talk to each other. We can't get on a plane and go visit somebody. We're not, we have to do our stand-ups virtually. So all of these things, we're building new patterns, we're building new ways of working. So far, we're still trying to figure out where this is headed. It's like I said, it's a dramatic shift. But I mean, so far we're seeing a really significant increase in demand for what we're doing since this has happened.
And Christian, clearly, based on having been engaged in this kind of ecosystem, what does that mean for what's happening right now? And what does that mean for how you're thinking about new ideas, new applications, new products, et cetera?
We need 5G more than ever now, right?
I
do.
I love listening to some of the discussions and panels throughout the AWE 2020, because it talks about the world moving from 2D to 3D. And in order to do that, you need great broadband. You need the next level of broadband, and we're not stopping installing 5G. We're announcing new cities. San Diego this week, we're announcing new capabilities and enhanced upload. But now what do you do with it, right? And part of what we're meant to do at the labs is start to tell people what those capabilities are and then help them build it faster. And I think times like these, it makes people do things faster because we have to. We've got constraints on us now, and so we've got to rapidly innovate to find a way to have our kids, not just have a video chat with their teacher, but do something more engaging or immersive. You got to find ways to connect with my doctor or loved one in a new way. And I think we see just how we're doing this now. Broadband's a big piece of it. But then taking action with it to create new experiences is really where we want to get out of this thing, back into the new normal with best practices and new ideas that we've had to implement because of these constraints, right?
And key to that has to be an ecosystem, because Ori, you know this better than just about anyone.
And those are the types of things that we think, folks like are critical.
Oops, sorry, I think you froze there for a minute and then you came back. Technical difficulties. But I think what you're saying is so critical because, as we all know, and particularly Ori as a founder, as somebody who developed a product, brought it to market, and then exited to Apple, the idea of building something new takes a lot of people. New ideas come from a lot of places, right? And there are a lot of things that need to happen in order for you to have an idea, make a prototype, figure out a product market fit, and then figure out if you can scale that in the real world, right? As a corporation. So now we have to accelerate all of those things lockstep. We have to do it together. The academics have to do it, the researchers have to do it, the graduate students have to do it, the investors have to do it, and the corporations have to do it. In the little time that we have left, what I'd love to hear from each of you is, what do you think the greatest opportunity is right now? And what do you think the greatest challenge is right now? And why do you think we're particularly positioned in New York to address one or the other aspects? Who wants to jump in on that one, people?
Christian, you want to take us? I'll lead us off. So I think that the biggest challenge right now is figuring out what these new modes of social interaction are going to be. I think that's the biggest bridge, we're going to have to jump as a culture right now. I think the tools we have are great, but the tools we have today are, they're kind of built for a mixed world, right? Where maybe we get some FaceTime, and then there's, oh, well, I'm traveling this week, so let me get on a video call. I think that's the challenge. The challenge is like, how do we continue to conduct business without the kind of tactile nature of these physical interactions? But that's also a really big opportunity. Like from our business, looking at computer vision, needing to give technologies these human-like qualities is now more important than ever. Right? Being able to interact with these technologies in a way that's meaningful and empathic, and automating things that we really never thought we'd have to automate before. That's the great opportunity we see before us. So, we're all going to have to build a new reality together. So it's a challenge and an opportunity at the same time.
And Christian, one of the things that you've said is, it's interesting because it's very important to nurture this ecosystem building in different places, because there are different cultures, different personalities, different histories, different marketplaces. But the walls come down a bit as a result of us all being at home and connecting virtually. How do you think that changes or doesn't change your view of the importance of being in a place like New York City, or being connected to a place like New York City?
Look, I think New York is some of that, and sitting here in New Jersey, right? There's different implications here versus other places in the country and in the world. So I think there's learnings from that, because you're in it in a different way, and there's different lenses that you take away from it. When we built out the 5G labs, we built them in different cities because each city has a different set of personalities, a different set of industries, the startup community, academia. But now I think the challenge with not being in front of each other right now in New York is an opportunity to start to, knock down those geographical barriers that we had between those cities in the past. So now we can start to do ecosystem bridging, right, between New York and London and LA and Cambridge and DC and all these places, and collaborate in ways that we weren't really thinking about, because we had the meetup at the lab at the RLab in Brooklyn, right? Now we have an opportunity to bring more folks together, just like Ari's been doing here for years, but at scale. And really, I think that's where some really big, great opportunities are going to happen, and we're excited to be a part of it.
I want to give you a shout out to Verizon, and I want everyone to check out the link that I believe Justin dropped in the group chat about some of the concerts. And let me let you tell us about the very cool thing that Verizon's doing in terms of live entertainment right now.
So we've been building out an ecosystem of partners, right? We've got our own esports gaming center. We've got teams that we work with. We think AR, VR, and gaming are big in a 5G world, and we've had artists that we sponsor in the past. We brought that ecosystem together for a good cause, which is to help small businesses. And so a program called Pay It Forward Live, which we run every Tuesday night and every Thursday night, bring a football player, esports player in League of Legends or Rocket League, and they stream for good causes, which are to help people donate to their local business. So we've seen over 70 million people watch thus far.
Well, there's Oscar, there's Alicia Keys, there's Elish. I mean, there's Teddy Ryan from One Republic. I mean, it's a really, I encourage people to check it out because it's a really interesting experience that's very, very different from like YouTube or even watching these live events that we've seen on Instagram.
Yeah, and it's a window into their lives, right? We're talking about
exactly.
It's like if you had somebody on Oprah's couch, now you're on their couch in their basement, right? So it's a different kind of connection, and it's a way for the influencer or the fan to get closer to one another for a good cause.
So Ori, in this new world, and we're talking about acceleration, and we're talking about how important it is for all these variety of stakeholders and people who have interest to be engaged, at least somewhere, right? To find some access point. Obviously, when I was preparing to do this panel today, I was really feeling sad because this is one of my favorite conferences of all, really, like the last 5 years. It's the best conference. Like there's just not a conference that's the same where you have that exact kind of focus on these spatial computing and future interfaces and 3D technology applications. I mean, I would just, roam the exhibit halls, and all of the things that I saw last year, like Nreal and the rest of them, are now exploding. The headsets, the little tiny headsets that are lighter than my glasses. So I won't go on and on about that. But what I want to hear from you, Ori, is how has it changed? Two things. One, now that you've been a year into the ecosystem building with us at RLab, and two, because now you're doing your conference digitally. How have those experiences? Have you found that you've garnered insights from the ecosystem building that are now being applied as you are trying to create this digital world that is really different from the in real life one that you've been building the last 11 years?
Yeah, I mean, listen. I think that at this point in our life cycle of this industry, we need to start looking into the farther future. Kind of like I was talking my opening keynote. We've been doing a lot of work. We as in kind of an industry over the last 10, 15, 20 years, some people 40 years, right? And we reached to a pretty important milestone in 2020. And despite everything happening in the world right now, it's actually a good year for spatial computing. We see more demand for many of the technologies that are provided. But a lot of us are still bogged down with the details of the day, with the hardware devices or, software and so on. And I think it's really important to look a bit ahead, 5, 10 years ahead, and to kind of try to see where this can all go. What's the spatial computing of 2030 that we all want to live in, right?
Can we even imagine what that's going to be? We can't even imagine. We have no idea what that's going to be.
But that's why we need to have that discussion. So, that's what we need to have the whole ecosystem. We need the labs like RLab and startups and corporations like Verizon all come together and kind of try to, debate and align our maps of where this is going. So that, Moore's Law was a great way to align the whole PC computing industry starting in the 60s and 70s. And people were able to kind of plan ahead what they can do with it. I think we need something equivalent to that. Maybe a bit more abstract because it's a very different kind of age, but try to see where we're trying to go, and I think that will help us all align. And investments will go into the right places, and corporations will partner with the right startups. And RLab, will be able to kind of host that kind of progress forward. And and hopefully get to the world that, again, we all want to live in.
I think it's really important to note that RLab is a nonprofit. So our interest is just driving this industry forward. It's not in selling products or any particular outcome. We just want to convene, provide opportunities for people to be exposed, to learn new skills, for corporates to have the opportunity to prototype and so on. What I'd like now is, as we sort of wrap up, and please, if you have questions and you're watching this panel, because I know how exciting we all are, I would love for Christian and Francis to, I'm gonna start with you actually, Christian, which is Verizon has so heavily invested in this next generation of technologies. You bought BlueJean, Verizon did not that long ago, which is the teleconferencing platform similar to Zoom, a Zoom competitor. You've invested in a series of challenges, and that's where Francis comes in because
I hate to be the one to bring us up back on
don't
track.
do it. I thought I had 5 minutes. I thought I had 5 minutes.
Lovely. We got about a minute. We're now a minute over. So I want to say thank you to all of you. I'm so sorry. Where can everybody reach you guys? I know AWE, you can reach out to Ori there, RLab, Justin and Adaora, and then of course Verizon. Thank you so much, everybody, for this amazing panel. RLab, I think it's rlab.com, right?
.nyc.
.nyc, sorry. Of course, it's in New York. So thank you so much to our panel. It was amazing. Thank you, Ori. Thank you, everybody. Amazing.
Thank you.
Coming up
Have a great
next,
rest of the day.
we have, thank you, guys.